Just Eff It. Hi, I'm Romy, an identity coach helping others who struggle with their sexual identity and families of queer youth find their path of understanding and acceptance.
And I'm Carla, a mom empowerment coach empowering moms to own their new identities and motherhood journeys.
And together we are the EFFing Madres. We are here to invite you guys into stories of some inspiring madres
who have changed their lives through an Eff It moment. So here we go. Just Eff It.
Good morning. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. We are the EFFing Madres. I am Carla. This is Romy. Romy, want to share what we do, what we're about?
Yes. Everyone tuning in for the first time. Those of you, welcome back. Happy Monday. Yes, we are two Latinas, two mamas, two best friends. We had an Eff It moment. God, Carla, how long ago?
It's been almost 2 years. They can be
very lengthy,
very lengthy people, and they evolve.
2 years ago, we had an Eff It moment and we started this podcast and we've never stopped. So this is a community for women, for moms, and a way for us to have conversations about saying Eff It. And Eff It is not fuck it, we don't care. It's the opposite. It's fuck it, we do care. We care a lot. We care enough.
Yeah.
So we are moms that have to have the responsibility of our children and our partners and much more than just ourselves. So when we have these big Eff It moments, it impacts not only us like it did before we were moms, it impacts everybody in our home and our family. So they can be really scary. And a lot of times moms won't make those big changes because of how it affects their family. So we have inspiring conversations that with women and moms that said Eff It, are saying Eff It. Maybe their Eff It moment failed. Maybe it was a success. Maybe they're in the middle of it, or maybe they have no idea how to effing have one.
Right. And it doesn't matter what the outcome is, because when you make the first step, it really takes you down this path and it ultimately changes you for the better, no matter what. So
yeah, 100%. So today we actually had a woman on who we just loved having on. We had Amy Edwards on our podcast, and she was just a light of like being alive. She was so inspiring. And so I follow her on social media, and she had this woman, I think I'm saying it correct. Deidre, how do I say it? Deidre?
I think it's Deidre. I want to say it's Deidre.
She had posted her, and I respect her kind of, suggestions and stuff like this. And I looked at the woman's page, and she is a mom, and she wrote a book, and it was called Begin Again. So she was posting about beginning again her life. What I assume, it had said like after divorce and stuff like that. And I had reached out and said, I'd love to have you on. Obviously, you had some big Eff It moment to then publish a book that talks about basically starting over. And she was excited to come on. So this is kind of like a blind date.
Those are always fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's bring her in.
Okay, everybody, we have Deidre with us. Thank you for joining us on this Monday. Thank you for being open to having a conversation with us.
Yes, I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me on.
We are going to jump right in, Carla.
Okay, so your first question, Deidre, what shifted your mindset to say Eff It that you're going to share with us today?
Oh, so a lot of my stories around divorce recovery. And there's so much shame around getting divorced, and it feels like a really isolating process. And so for me, a big Eff It moment was, I'm going to actually start talking about this. I didn't know anybody who was talking about their divorce. I didn't know people who were openly sharing about it on social media and talking about the process of dealing with that grief and that loss. And so that was such a big moment for me that ended up in me writing a book and, starting to get messages out there about divorce recovery and help women get out of that isolation that we feel.
Oh, I love this. I mean, I went through a divorce, I think it was 5 years ago now, and I've never, and I'm a very public person. I talk about almost everything on social media. Do you know that I've never talked about my divorce and still don't feel comfortable talking about it?
Yeah, I totally understand. And so when I was writing my book, it was like, what parts am I comfortable sharing? What parts belong just to me? And what parts do I want to share? And I have little kids, right? Yeah. And so like, what's okay for me to share out in the open with them? But it was really freeing for me when I decided this is important and people need it, because I only had 2 friends that had gone through divorce before me. And they were the only people who I could rely on and ask questions. And I had a mentor come into my life a couple of years into my divorce recovery. And for me, that's what unlocked the growth, was having those people that had gone before me. And so I realized, like, why don't I write the book that I needed?
Hmm.
Because I think so many people don't know where to ask for help.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not divorced, but I do come from divorce, and like especially back in the day, it was like you didn't hear a peep, and the fact that like you got divorced,
Mm-hmm.
how long ago did you get
It was
divorced?
almost 5 years ago, Rami. So right around the
Yes.
same time frame as
Yeah.
you,
So the fact that
2019.
It was
yeah,
right
that
before
even like 5
COVID.
years.
That's right.
Yep.
Double whammy.
It was like getting a divorce and then the end of the world happened.
Yeah, it was.
But like even getting to 5 years ago, the fact that people were still, it's still like not something that people talk about, yet it happens all the
Right.
time, is really just absolutely, it's so, but it's so mind boggling because it's so, I mean, the statistic is 50% of marriages end in divorce.
Mm-hmm.
So like there are a
Yeah.
lot of fucking divorced people out there. It needs to be spoken about.
You know, Brene Brown talks about divorce and she calls it disenfranchised grief, because it's grief that we as a society don't know what to do with. It's like pet loss, right? We don't have a framework for how we deal with it. And so when I started going through divorce recovery, I didn't even know the words divorce recovery, right? I didn't know that was a thing. I reached out to a friend of mine who's a therapist in Austin, actually, and said, hey, like, what's the gold standard? And I work in coaching, right? And so I was like, what's the gold standard for divorce recovery? How do I get certified? And she was like, there's nothing. Literally, there's nothing. You people are just creating their own. And I was like, great, well, I'll put together my own framework for what I feel like is important for people to know, because it is this form of grief. We don't know how to talk about it, right? That was another big effort moment for me, was like, I felt like I was hiding when I was going through my divorce, because you don't tell people in the early stages. When your husband tells you, I'm not happy and I want to move out, you don't like start telling. It's just such a weird season. You feel very, very isolated. And so when he finally did move out, I felt like I don't want to live in this isolation. I want to tell people. And so I went to my coworkers. It was so freaking uncomfortable, but I made a list of everybody in my life that I interact with normally who I felt like needed to know this. And just like I was raw and open and told people. And that was me reclaiming divorce and choosing to do it differently. And that was like part of my whole EFFing process, was like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it the way that feels right to me. I'm not going to do it the way other people have done it, because that doesn't feel good. Now, I had a friend going through divorce at the same time. We both worked together. She didn't tell a soul. That was how she wanted to do it, right? She was private. She's still like, she's engaged in a new relationship, and some people don't even know she got divorced. But it's just like everybody does it their own way.
Yeah. I'm curious, as to saying like F it and being open and taking this journey that felt like yours, like what kind of opportunities then opened up, as we can see some did. What opportunities opened up for you by saying F it and doing this for yourself?
Yeah. So the interesting thing about my divorce, and I talk about this a lot in the book, was that it was actually an opportunity for me to hit reset on my life.
Mm.
And that was the F it moment for me. When I remember like sitting in my living room thinking like, oh my God, I'm a single mother now.
Mhm.
And that reality hitting me, and thinking, all the single moms I know, they're really stressed. Finances are tough. Majority of single mothers live below the poverty line.
Yep.
Most of them are not sharing custody, right? They're doing it all themselves.
Yep.
And I just was like flooded with all of this, like, oh my God, I'm going to be a statistic now. And I felt so overwhelmed. And I remember having this thought of like, nope, that's not for me. Like something inside of me knew that wasn't for me. And I was like, F that. I'm not going to do that. I'm not signing up for that. I'm going to figure this out and do it a different way. And so the opportunities that started to come to me were because of that huge mindset shift of like, what if this is not the death of me? What if this is actually a reset
Mm.
moment? It's all reframing, right? And I talk about that extensively in the book, because reframing is not denying the pain, and it's not sugarcoating it. It's saying, hey, there's a ton of pain and grief here, but what am I going to do with all of that, and how am I going to make this amazing? Everything in my life changed, and COVID happened right after that. And everything, my kids got sent home from school. My nanny couldn't show up all of a sudden, right? It was really, really stressful, but I rode those waves, and all these opportunities started coming to me, especially when I started talking openly about my divorce. That's when women started reaching out to me. coming out of the woodwork, and then having that ability to like bring people into my story and help them.
Well, that's why we always say we like everyone has a story. Everyone has a story to share, and it's important to speak up about it because you never know who can that story resonates with, and
Yeah.
that person starts to feel validated, and then they start speaking about it, and it's like it is like a snowball effect. So it's really, really important to be vocal about these things. And I understand, like divorce and some other things can be a little bit taboo for some people,
Yeah.
but it's those things that I feel or those topics that are the most
Hmm.
important to be spoken about because it normalizes it. I mean, now I'm starting to I have some clients that tell me like they're throwing divorce parties. Like
Yeah.
they're like it's
Yeah.
becoming more of like it happened.
Well, because
Yeah.
that turns it into a celebration, Carla. And I've had friends do that
Yeah.
divorce party where, and it's like you said, and I appreciate you saying this. It's not the death of like you, it's a rebirth of you, right? Like it's not the end
Hmm.
all like we look at, like this massive failure. It can be a celebration in so many ways of a new
Yeah.
opportunity.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree. I also think there's something about going through really, really, really shitty seasons of life that just open us up
Mm.
to empathy on a new level, right? Like
Yes.
I couldn't deal with hard feelings before my divorce. If somebody was suffering, struggling, I'd be like, ooh, I don't want to catch that. Like, go, I'm not interested. Yeah, right? You're just like, ugh. But all of a sudden, and I could tell, like, when I would tell and share with someone I was going through a divorce, I could see it in their face. Like, are they comfortable stepping into this with me? Or do they feel like it's a disease? I'm sure you experienced that, Rami. Like, friends isolate and
Yeah.
they
Oh,
go away. And
Deidre, I've always had a lot of big dramatic things happening in my life. It just seems to be a part of my story. And so, yes, like when I go through some of those seasons, you see people that are like, this is too much.
yeah,
You're too
yeah.
much. And then you see people that have been through that are like, I got you. And I'm grateful you said that because when I went through my divorce, I met a mom here in Austin. She's now one of my best friends. We are family. And she had been through her divorce like a year before. That girl
Mm,
took me under her wing, got me a job as a single mom who had been
yes.
working for 3 years. It was Chelsea who we had on the show. Got me into a job, got me like feeling like myself again. And if it wasn't for this stranger who took in my pain and just invited me along the like single mom life with
Yes.
her, I think
Yeah.
back, like I have chills. Just she was accepting of it. It didn't scare her, right?
Right.
Where some
Yes.
of the people
Yes.
that have known me my whole life are like, oh my God, like this is another like b- big deal. It's too big, right? So
Hmm.
you're so right with like saying that and then being gone through it and being able to now
Yeah.
open yourself up to other women going through it.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you guys familiar with Chris Card? Do you know who she is?
Mm-mm.
Mm-mm.
Writer, health activist. She wrote a beautiful book called I'm Not a Mourning Person, but it's mourning as in like grief mourning. And the
Mm.
book's all about grief and loss. She's lived with cancer for 20 years. Her father passed away of cancer. And she talks in the book about these life ruptures. That's what she calls them. And there are these moments in life. It's a cancer diagnosis, right? It's a job loss, it's pet
Mm-hmm.
loss, these huge life moments that really break us open. And if we can, even with that grief and that loss and that huge rupture happening, like if we can reframe it and ask, what's the gift in this? Right? What
Always.
are the gifts? What are those opportunities that are here for me now? And then use it to propel us into a place where we are more comfortable with suffering and we can be more empathetic. Like that's really, I think that's like the most epic effort moment of all, when you're like, hey, I'm going to actually turn this thing on its head and jump off of it because this is going to be amazing for me.
Yeah, I mean that touches on the fact that like we all have the power to make life the way we want it. Bad things happen, good things happen. They
Mm,
actually aren't like really bad or good. It's how you interpret them to
that's
be and
right.
how you react to
Yeah.
it. So if you flip it around and look at it like, what's the silver lining in this? What am I getting out of
Mm,
this? Then you really do, you get back on a path of growth. You start looking at things differently and you start seeing opportunities versus disadvantages and like
yeah.
victimhood and all that sort of stuff. So it's in us. The power is
Hmm.
in us to live the life that we want to live. It's all our perspective.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'd
I
want to
love
jump
that.
into the next question, which is what positive or negative things did you learn about yourself
Mm.
when you started this effort moment started?
So many negative things. So I, you know, I think I mentioned earlier, like I had a hard time feeling hard feelings and being present in those. And for me, it was I had to learn how to feel feelings. I really had, that was such an underdeveloped skill for me.
Mm.
I only wanted to feel the good and the positive feelings, right? And so all of a sudden, I was in this place where I was practicing feeling. And for me, that's been the bedrock of every growth that I've had since my divorce is learning how to be comfortable with feelings, riding those waves, made me a better mother because now all of a sudden I'm more consistent for my kids. I know how to ride their emotional waves, right? We're headed into teenage years. My son's about to be 12 and I'm able to ride those waves with him. So I think for me, that was such a pivotal moment that just opened me up to live a whole different life. Just that skill alone.
That resonates with me. I was not a feelings person either, and, like, once I became a mom was a big effort moment for me, but, like, it literally did switch, like, I started to feel these feelings that felt so uncomfortable. I was like, "What is
Yeah.
this high? What are these lows?" And, yeah, like, I'd only like to feel the good, and all the bad I'd just kinda,
Hmm.
like, sweep under, but
Yeah.
it once you start tapping into those emotions, you really do start to be able to connect and and, like, I don't wanna say deal, but, like, be able to understand empathy. You learn
Yeah.
empathy. Like, I can empathize with my
Yeah.
daughter, and I would have never been able to do that, like, before I became a mom, obviously.
Right.
So,
Yeah. And I think I learned just how, like, I don't want to say I was tapped out in my life because I was super, super visionary, super driven, very strategic. But, like, from a self compassion perspective, that just didn't exist for me pre
mm,
divorce. And so, like, learning about myself and learning where I can support myself in a way that I just hadn't done before.
yeah,
I think that's a powerful thing. I
yeah.
know coming out of my divorce, I'm three divorces in here. So I've been married three times, I have three divorces. I'll probably try again. Like who knows? Like this is my life. I grew up with a mom that, had three, four divorces. Like marriage and relationships is definitely not my strength. Like I got a lot of strength. That has not been something I've been able to like master, but I give myself credit because I just keep fucking trying. But I will say, coming out of this last
Love
one,
it.
which was with my daughter, right, where we actually shared a child, um,
Ooh,
that one was different. That one hits different. And we have this image that we want to be when we become moms. We have this image that we've had no matter what since we were children of the kind of mom or family that we're going to have. And when it shatters, it's so different. And so all my other,
yeah.
divorces and relationships, it was like, fuck this. Like I'm moving on, whatever. I'm young, right? This one hurt. This one was like,
Hmm.
oh my gosh. And so I had to learn to have like a lot of empathy and compassion for myself, right?
Yeah.
Through that process. But you're right. Like I look back on the last 5 years and I remember walking out. I don't think I've ever said this, but like walking out and, I had nothing. I didn't have my car. I didn't have an apartment. I didn't have a TV when I left that marriage. And I look at my life 5 years later and I'm like, damn, I am capable of so much, like on my own,
Hmm.
so much. And it is, you learn so much about what you can do.
Yeah.
Mhm,
That's
mhm.
so
Yes.
real. That is so real. I think financially,
Yes.
professionally, I've
Emotionally.
exceeded every emotionally,
Yes.
the types of relationships that I'm able to have now with men,
Yes.
like
Yeah.
through the roof, totally different. I couldn't have imagined this life 5 years ago. I
No,
couldn't have imagined it.
no.
So yeah,
I was just gonna say it really is that quote, the quote that you posted yesterday, like, "A woman is like a tea bag. You never know how strong she is until she's in hot water."
Yeah.
Like,
hmm,
seriously.
so
Yeah.
real.
And
Yeah.
sometimes it's like you said, these lessons happen to us. Like, what are you going to take from them? And sometimes they teach you what you're capable of, if you're willing
Yeah.
to push through it. How did you navigate the self-talk going through this in terms of like
Mm,
the negative self-talk through this? So when you're feeling good and you're feeling inspired and you're on your high through this, obviously the sad comes in, all the hard stuff comes in and creeps in. How'd you push through that?
yeah. So having really sturdy rituals was important for me. And so having time in the morning before my kids would get up, time to journal, think, meditation, right? Having those sturdy rocks, those safe places where those were times when I could let my emotions off the leash, right? And just kind of let them run around and I could dump them all into a notebook. So giving myself that space at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day. So I had that time, quiet time, but then also I had to work, I had to carry on with my
Mhm.
life. And it's really hard when you feel like you're drowning in grief and you can't eat and you can't sleep and right, all those things, your nervous system's out of whack and you're like really deep in the trauma. So what I learned to do was when those big emotions would come up, I would like directly talk to the emotion. And so I would say,
Mm.
hey, sadness, I see you're there. I acknowledge and I feel this. I have to get on a Zoom call right now and work with this client, but I'm going to come back to you because I have every night, right? I've got this standing appointment with myself when it's a safe time for me to come back. And so, like, that allowed me to put that in a drawer for just a moment, always promising myself I was going to come back to it. And I always did, right? Because if it didn't come back to it, it would come back to me.
Oh yeah.
And so, addressing those feelings, like when they would come up and being able to, because you have to still function and carry on with your life. But I think learning to talk directly to those emotions, even noticing things like fear coming up for me, like, God, I feel so trapped in anxiety and fear right now, like what's going on, and addressing it directly. And then just, here's the thing that for me was the game changer: you don't have to do anything with those emotions, right? You just have to let them be, feel them, breathe. For me, it's always writing. That was always the catharsis for me. But like knowing that just because I have these big feelings come up, I don't have to have any action associated with the feelings. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes, totally.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
I love what you said really quick at the beginning about just like the drowning in it. If you haven't been there, most of us, like as mothers, have this, right? Like, but when you're going through the divorce, there's so much pain, like you said, and fear and all those feelings. But like you're still having to show up and like be the mom that gets them to school and makes the lunch and shows, and you could come, like
Doesn't.
you could wake up in absolute anxiety and fear of how you're going to do this, and you're grieving, but yet you've got
Yeah.
to show up for some other life. It is one of the strongest things I've ever done in my life.
It's so real because your kids don't realize
They
how bad it
no,
is.
and nor should they, right? Like, nor should we
They
put that
shouldn't.
on them. It's not for them to
Mm-mm.
carry, right? So there's that balance of,
Mm-mm.
yes, show them the real pain and truth to life, right? But also age appropriate, right? And what's
Yeah.
necessary. So, you are
Mm-hmm.
smiling and showing up to like the school activities alone for the first time without anyone next to you. I've gone 5 years with no one next to me at a school recital, with all these happy families. Like, you smile, you show up, but like you feel that if you're a
Mm-hmm.
divorced woman and you're smiling with so many emotions, it's just heavy.
Yeah. I remember during that season of life, my son was 7, my daughter was 3, and I was teaching my son how to play kickball. He didn't know how to play. And so every day after school, get off the bus and we would go in the backyard and play kickball. And it was such a physical release for me, right? Because
Mhm.
we're laughing, we're running. And I remember in that moment feeling like, oh my God, this is such a it's so weird because there's so much joy because your kids are little and you still enjoy motherhood, right? And you're like seeing pleasure on their faces. They're making their first little home run in kickball, but you are also simultaneously drowning in grief. And it
Mhm.
is this huge, like, I talk in the book about how we have capacity to hold so much and we don't realize it, right?
Mhm.
You can hold tremendous joy and
Yeah.
hope in one hand and hold just incredible life sucking grief in the other. And knowing that you have that capacity to do both is like profound. I'll never be the same again because I know I have that inside of me.
That should if I had to write a book, which like, and I had to have like a title, it would be like that. It would be the biography of my life, holding both, holding immense joy and
Oh,
pain at the same time.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I haven't been divorced. However, when I lost my dad and that
Mm,
grief and having an 8-month-old, it was like it's such a roller coaster of emotions that you go through, but like literally, and you have this little kid that's like so much pure joy, and
yeah.
it's almost like a god, like thank God I had her when
Yeah.
Yeah.
all of that was happening. And I don't
Yes.
know if you feel the same way, like, thank God you had
Mm-hmm.
your kids when all of this was happening, because it does kind of pull you out from that, and it
Yep.
allows for you to just like you said, these activities allowed for a release for you, but you were connecting with
Mm-hmm.
your kid aside, at the same time having these emotions. So I almost feel like, thank God, for me
I
anyway,
know.
to have had my daughter when all this happened.
Yeah. Totally resonate with that.
Yeah. I'm curious, before you got divorced, you had this effort moment. You talked about how you
Hmm.
were just like, ew, gross, empathy, emotions, and all that. So
Feelings.
obviously, yeah, feelings. Obviously, you are a much more empathetic person. Are there any other characteristics that you have like compared to the old self that
Mm.
you've gained?
Hmm. I think I'm much more comfortable with failing and making mistakes
Mm.
than I was before. I wasn't like a perfectionist before, but I just like had plans and goals, and I was so structured and so driven in every area of life. And now I just think self compassion really flows in a lot of different directions when it starts to flow. And for me, that's one of the ways that it flowed out was I was like, oh, I made a mistake here, and being comfortable with taking risks in a way that I wasn't, because I'm like, guess what? My life blew up once and I figured it out.
Yes.
If it happens again, I'm
Yes.
gonna figure it out. Like this
Yes.
intense self trust of being like, guess what? I'm always betting on me, always, because
Yeah.
I know I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna be able to get through it.
Yeah.
I've had that like my whole life since I was a kid, because it's been traumatic since I like came out of the womb, like, and so I've always had this like, it's going to be okay. I know it's going to be okay because it's always been okay.
Mm.
Right. And for
Mm-hmm.
some women,
Mm-hmm.
divorce is the first big almost feeling that they feel they failed in something, right? Sometimes that is the first time and they come out of it and they are okay, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
what is it? Like there's blessings and there's in the lessons and stuff like that, but if you come out of it, you show yourself, you're fine. You're going to be okay. This is going to hurt
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to bounce back. And if you haven't had that lesson
Mm-hmm.
thus far, it's unfortunate that this is the way you're getting it, but
Yeah.
it's going to teach you that you are okay. And
Mm-hmm.
so then, yeah, when you fail again, which you will,
Yeah. It's
may
inevitable.
not may not be in divorce or in your marriage, but you will fail at something in your life.
Yeah.
You've got this fight in you that knows, well, we're going to be okay. And if I take a chance on something that's scary and I fail, it's going to be okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. Taking chances and trying
Yeah,
the not being afraid of failure. Because, like,
Mm-hmm.
I think most people live a safe life because of that fear.
they're scared.
Yeah.
And if you're not failing, you're not living.
Mm-mm.
So
Right.
you've got to try things. Otherwise,
Yeah.
you'll get to the end of your life and be like, "Fuck, I never tried anything."
Right. That experimentation is such a like posture. It's a different posture for me now. So one thing that kicked it off was in 2020. So 2019, life blows up, husband moves out, files for divorce. I was making my goals for 2020. I work in executive coaching. And so goals is like, such a huge thing that's ingrained in me. So I'm making my 2020 goals and I'm like, you know what? I actually don't have kids. I have a job, but I actually don't have a life. I don't
Mm.
have like what's bringing me joy right now. Like, I don't know. And so I decided in 2020 I would try one new hobby every single month for the whole year. And so I was just like trying all kinds of things. I was like, I'm going to go hiking. I'm going to go kayaking. I'm going to
Mhm.
try pottery and baking and all these things. And my life is so much richer now because of that experimentation that it's carried into my life every day now. I'm like, how can I experiment and try new things?
This has
Yes.
been like such a heavy thing for me this week. It's so funny you're saying this because I also do coaching and I have a few clients. And this week we were going over the question that Lewis House brought up, which he brought it up in his book. And I thought it was so great. And it was a question I was asking like some of my clients and then asking myself, which is like, what does your perfect day look like? Like actually think of what your perfect day looks like and really explore that. And there was this quote and it was, the unlived life can make people sick. And I was just like,
Mm.
Mm.
"Ugh, like it'll make you sick if you're not living."
And experimenting and trying new things. And we all need novelty, even if it's scary. Like we need novelty in our lives.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Learning new things allows for you to connect to new people a lot of the
That's real.
times too. And you never know what sort of opportunities then come from connecting with these new people. That's why these effort moments, because these effort moments essentially have you like start fresh, start new, like refocus on your life. It's a new step into a whole new perspective. And that's why we built this like podcast and we started. It's like it really is important to try these things that are foreign to you because it will take you down a path that you will never regret. Even if it
Yeah.
might be bumpy and like kind of all over the place, you'll never regret it because you'll learn so much about you and your capabilities and your skill set, but also connect you to people that you would have never thought you would have connected to. And that's why it's so
That's
important.
so real.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is.
I love that.
Yep. Yep.
So my last question then to you would be, what is your message of empowerment to your children and to any women listening that might be going through this, might be listening to this and it's hitting them? What would you say?
It really is that concept of you can hold it all. I know it
Mm,
doesn't feel like you can, but and that's the nuance that I try to teach my children is it's a both and mindset that we have to adopt. Like, yeah, this is scary and it's also exciting. This
yes.
is painful and there's so much hope, right? And so how do we live in the tension of life? That's what the tension of life is learning to hold those things. And so that's a big thing that I, teach my kids. You have two hands for a reason. So you can hold two things at the same time. And so,
Mm.
how to not have that binary thinking of it has to be either or, but it's a yes and both. It's everything. So that's what I would say to all the moms going through this is I know you may not feel it, you may not see it, but you actually have the capacity to hold all of this and process it and move through it in a way that's just going to ignite the next season of your life.
I love that so much.
Yes, I love that too. You have two hands for a reason. You can hold two things at once. I love that. I never,
Thank you.
yes, that's absolutely true. That's so beautiful. Love it.
We'll be
Wow.
teaching our daughters that now, Carla.
Good.
Yeah, you have two hands for a
Yeah, for
reason.
a
You can hold
reason.
two things
Yeah,
at
it's
once.
like that same
Yeah.
saying, like two things can coexist. So I always say, like, you can fall in
Yeah.
love with life and still be in a grieving trauma. Like those two can coexist together. There's not one without the other. So
Absolutely.
I'm still healing. I'm in a lot of pain. I'm grieving from things in my life, but
Yeah.
I'm also happy learning and falling in love. And those two things are allowed to share space, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I
Yeah.
can't thank you enough for coming on and joining us. We are so grateful
Oh,
for
thanks,
you.
y'all.
Could you share with everyone where they can find your book and connect with you,
Yes.
all your things?
Yeah, my book's called Begin Again. You can find it on Amazon under my name, Deidre Romero. You can go to deidreromero.com or Instagram, Deidre Daily. That's where you can find me and get connected in all the ways.
Sweet. Okay. And when did it come out? Out of
Came out
curiosity.
in March. The book came out
Oh.
in March.
Oh,
hmm
okay. So very
Fresh.
recently.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's been fun.
Wow. All
Oh,
right.
I
hmm
have a very close friend that I will be recommending that book to. So
Oh,
thank you for having
please do.
something like that out there for
hmm
women and moms that I know need that message more than anything right now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
absolutely. Thanks, y'all. This was great.
Yeah, this is where we're all going to say just F it, but why don't you kick it off and then we'll go after you?
Just F it.
Just F it.
Just F it.